Hello, everyone. Big Jake coming back at you from 3M VTA, and I'm finally doing my in-depth look at Trigun. So, I hope all you nerds out there in YouTube land, please like and subscribe. And like I said, this is Trigun. So, first of all, what is Trigun? Well, Trigun, the anime show, is a anime based off of a 3-volume manga of the same name, written and illustrated by Yasuhiro Nito. And as far as I know, all of the episodes of the show follow the original 3 volumes. There was eventually a continuation series called Trigun Maximum, but as far as I know, none of the anime episodes have anything to do with that version. So, yeah, and it only has one season so far, but exciting news, hopefully. Crunchyroll has decided to redo the series, so we're not getting a continuation as far as I know. As far as I know, it's just a redone, or a reboot, I guess you could say, of the original series done by Crunchyroll. It's going to be 3D animation style, so I'm crossing my fingers it'll be good because, as I said in my one anime video that I did before, this is my favorite anime. So I'm just really looking forward to them not ruining it, basically. Um, the other things you need to know about Trigun this series, it was set on the planet Gunsmoke in the anime, but in the manga, the planet's name is No Man's Land. So, but let's go ahead and get further into this. So, Trigun thoroughly revolves around its main character, Vash, known as Vash the Stampede, the humanoid typhoon. Um, Vash is our hero. He is a crack shot, expert gunfighter. Um, they don't really do. He doesn't really do a lot of hand-to-hand combat, but what he does do in the show, he definitely seems to be able to hold his own fairly well in it. And he's also a big dork. Yeah, for lack of a better word, I literally say down here, he's goofy. He's a real goofy character. Um, he is physically in his mid-20s, but he's actually 131 years old at the start of the anime series. Um, and what he is, and we are going to go into some spoiler alert territory. We are going to go into some spoilers, so spoiler alert territory, starting here and later on down the road. So, this isn't really touched on in the show, but Vash and his brother Knives, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, are actually interdimensional plant beings that are used to power things. Basically, they're literally used to like power ships and stuff. And Vash got his moral compass from a woman named Rem Severum, which we'll also talk about here in a little bit. So he's unbelievably peaceful. He's very polite. He doesn't believe in taking life whatsoever. He absolutely abhors the fact of taking anybody's life. He doesn't even really like to hurt anybody, really. But and the reason I put this picture up, the one picture here, of all the scars and the body modifications and such, is they even say this in the anime. Now in the manga it might be a little different, but he received so much damage, basically not killing his opponents and doing anything he can to keep from doing that. So that's something that is pretty important to his character. The fact that he went through all that and still feels the need to abstain from ending life at all possibilities. The other thing about Vash is he I'm trying to think of the best word for it, but that's basically what it is. And the other thing about Vash that makes him such a compelling character is he is in immense pain, really, psychologically and emotionally, but he hides it very well with a smile, and he hides it with his goofy attitude. He he doesn't wear his heart on his sleeve, as the term might be. And honestly, to quote one of my favorite internet reviewers, Ben the Sage, and for my money, he might be the most well-written and endearing character in anime, honestly. And so, yeah, we're off. So right there, with a character like that in a futuristic Western style anime, you're in for a treat, honestly, and it really was. This show is absolutely amazing. My favorite anime. And a little bit more about Vash. They nicknamed him the Humanoid Typhoon and Vash the Stampede because so much destruction follows this man. But when you watch the show, you basically find out that it's all accidental. Stuff just kind of happens around him, and he gets a lot of times he's not even doing it, and he just gets blamed for it. So, but let's go ahead and move on with our look at Trigun. So right here we have Vash's allies, which are Meryl Streif, also known as Derringer Meryl, Millie Thompson, and Nicholas D. Wolfwood. Now, Nicholas D. Wolfwood is, and we'll get into this a little bit more later too, Nicholas is actually a member of a group called the Hoe Guns, which is tasked to track down and destroy Vash the Stampede. But he actually ends up joining him. Nicholas is a pretty complicated character from what I can understand between the manga and the anime. He, even though he is an assassin, and in the manga he was directed by Knives directly to track down and stick with Vash and to keep tabs on him. So, but in the anime, it's not 100%. It's not revealed till later that he's part of this group. But even then, they don't outright say it. They just imply it by some of the people he talks to and that kind of thing. And Nicholas Wolfwood is, on a lot of levels, somewhat his equal as far as gunfighting capability. In the manga, he was known as Nicholas the Punisher. And then you have, like I said, you have the fact that he's supposed to be there, basically as Vash's enemy, but he ends up befriending Vash, being lured by his kind and gentle spirit, but also trying to change that naiveness of, being peaceful all the time is somewhat of a fantasy in such a dreary and such a hopeless world, basically, that you can't always be like that because you will die. But of course, nobody can really change who Vash is, at least not to his core. And then you have Meryl Streif and Millie Thompson. Now, they work for the Bernard Daly Insurance Company, who is responsible for who insures basically the properties that Vash has been responsible for destroying. So they're there to track down Vash, assess damage, and pay out accordingly. Now, Meryl Streif, of course, does, as I'm sure somebody out there either guessed if you haven't seen it, Meryl Streif eventually does fall in love with Vash. You can definitely tell that. Now, in the manga, I don't know how that worked because I've never actually fully read it. I've just read excerpts here and there for research for this video. But Vash doesn't really return her affection, and a lot of that is because he knows how dangerous it is to be around him, and he doesn't want to endanger her. And then some of it is also that it seems like he can't get over Rem, because he has like a really weird emotional concept of Rem, and so he doesn't really return Meryl's affection, which it does weigh on her, and you can see that in a couple episodes. Millie Thompson is Meryl's friend, and she's the one of the two girls that usually does like the hard work to make money while whatever town they're living in. She's really a beastly woman. There's a couple episodes where you see her lifting incredibly heavy and being incredibly strong and stuff like that. And so now in the show, and I don't, like I said, once again, I don't know fully about the manga. In the show, Millie Thompson develops feelings for Nicholas, and it is revealed that Nicholas does develop feelings for Millie too. And way later in the show, there's an episode, ironically enough, spoilers again, if you don't want to hear this, just letting you know now. In the episode where Nicholas dies, when they go to Millie's room, when they go to Nicholas's room, Millie is there. So it's obvious that they had slept together, and she's literally sitting there saying, "No, I'm not going. He told me to wait for him," that kind of thing. And then of course she starts crying. But they don't really give us a reaction to her finding out that he has died, so I would definitely be interested to see how that would go in the manga, at least, since I'm sure they covered it more in there than they do in the anime series. So, well, let's move on, shall we? Now here are some other important characters to the show that aren't necessarily main characters other than Millions Knives. You have Rem Severin, who was Vash and Knives' caretaker when they were found, and this is where Vash gets his moral compass. She instilled the idea that all life is precious into Vash. Then you have Millions Knives, who is Vash's brother, who is quite literally insane. In the anime, he was driven to hate humanity based on how humanity treated him, and that, with a sense of superiority, believed that humanity should be eradicated from the universe. And he tries to do that, and of course, stuff happens. They do somewhat stop him, and then, it goes on from there. In the manga, however, he goes awry because they found another interdimensional plant being that had been experimented, dissected, vivisected, and so forth on, which makes Millions Knives become the way he is. So, and then we have brilliant Dynamites Neon, who is a character in 2 episodes of the show. And even though he's not a main character, I felt the need to include him in this just because, with him having, actually, he may even be in 3 episodes, but I know 2 for sure. But he has a pretty decent impact in those episodes. And the fact that he is another expert gunfighter that tries to challenge Vash the Stampede, and he wants to do that to make himself more infamous. But of course, basically what happens is they enter a duel. Vash is already wounded from fighting all of his men. But even with being mortally wounded, Vash still, for the most part, pretty much gets the better of him without trying and without killing him. And Brilliant Dynamite's Neon basically notices this and realizes that, yeah, even though he's wounded, he's still besting me, so who knows what would happen if he was at, full strength, basically. So they give up and they stop, and then Brilliant Dynamite's Neon stops this caravan that he's trying to capture, basically, from going off a cliff. So in the end, he is a man of honor, and so it's kind of neat to see that a villain that's also a man of honor in the show. So, moving on, we're going to talk about the Hoe Guns, which are, in my opinion, the best part of the show. The Hoe Guns are a group of assassins hired to track down and destroy Vash the Stampede. There were a couple that they didn't do and they changed, like, for example, in the anime, there's only 12. But there's actually 13 in the manga. There's 2 that aren't mentioned, but they're actually technically the same person. It's a guy who Livio the Double Fang and Roslo the Tri-Punisher are actually the same character, but they're alter egos of that person. And then you have Elendira the Crimson Nail, who is not in the anime at all, only in the manga, who apparently in the manga is the strongest by far of the Hoe Guns, so that would have been pretty interesting. Kane and Chapel from the anime are only in the anime. Chapel is in the manga, but he is not a Hoe Gun. He's actually the leader of this other group of assassins that Nicholas is from. But to start it off, we have Legato Blue Summers, who is Knives' right-hand man, and he's the direct underling of Knives. He and the other thing is, before I go on, I want to mention all of these people basically they're like DC supervillain powers. Like it's pretty awesome. Like Legato Blue Summers has the ability to make people physically do things. Like, he doesn't control their mind, he controls their bodies. And it's pretty awesome when you actually get to see it firsthand. Although he does have the ability to manipulate minds, I believe, because of a scene that he did with Vash where he made Vash see something that didn't actually happen. So, and then you have Monev the Gale, who is the guy with the machine gun there on his arm and who's unbelievably huge. He's basically literally this gigantic, monstrous, bulging muscle man with these huge machine guns on his arms. And yeah, he's trying to, and he literally gets, tasked to destroy Vash. And his battle with Vash is one of the best moments in the show, which I will go into later on. And then we have Dominique the Cyclops, who is the only female Hoe Gun in the anime. But she doesn't, as far as physically, she doesn't have anything special about her. She doesn't seem to be like an expert gunfighter or anything, but what she has is something called the Demon's Eye. And you can see in her picture here, she has one of her eyes covered. And what it is the Demon's Eye dulls the senses of her adversaries, so she can appear to be like teleporting around. She can easily best them in fights, gun fighting, etc. So pretty interesting powers there. We'll go ahead and get into some more Hoe Guns here. Next up we have Zazie the Beast. Zazie the Beast is he's a man, but he looks like a child. At least I think so. In the anime, it's not very clear. In the manga, he was actually apparently he was a hive mind of insects, so the name Zazie the Beast makes more sense. In the show, like I said, he looks like a child, but since they don't say it, I don't know. But he might still be a child just by the way the other characters treat him, even after knowing that he's Zazie the Beast. But he has this little thing on his ear, and you can just barely see it in that picture here, that controls these like giant sandworm type things. Which this is another great moment in the show, because when they defeat Zazie the Beast, Vash is trying to appeal to his basically childlike, vulnerable side, and then Nicholas shoots him and kills him, feeling that Vash would not be able to get through to him. And of course, Vash is extremely disappointed, but Nicholas basically tells him that you can't treat the world like that with your life on the line, Then we have E.G. Mine, who is the spiky dude over there. Honestly, he's my least favorite. There's nothing really too special about him other than he has that rig that fires all these spikes at everybody. Vash handles him pretty easily in the show. Now, Raide the Blade, who is the samurai there, is the real deal. He is expert swordsman. He's a good shot with a rifle. He tries to engage Vash in a fight to the death because he wants to seek ultimate enlightenment. During this episode, I won't go into it now because we're going to go into it later, but one of the most amazing things in the entire series happens, and that's by far my favorite fight of the show, is Vash versus Raide the Blade. And he also has, when he wields his sword, it's almost like a shockwave that you can see cutting through the town and the landscape when he ever slices at Vash. So, pretty interesting. Let's go ahead and go on to the next set here. All right, the next ones we have Gray the Nine Lives, who is a sentient robot, and that's pretty much it. He's a robot that's armed to the teeth. He's a giant. He's literally huge. I think he's, in the show, I think he's something like 10 feet tall, or maybe even 12 feet tall, or something like that. And he's got guns and missiles and all kinds of things aside from just his brute strength. Then we have Leonov the Puppet Master, who, if you can see in the picture there, he has this little orb, and he literally uses actual like puppet-like creatures, and he controls them to do his bidding from far away. This particular episode where you get to see them fight all three of these guys is pretty interesting. Ultimately, Leonov tries to get the better of Vash with a final attempt on his life that fails. But of course our hero survives, Then you have Hobart the Gauntlet, who is this misshapen creature of a human being who has these like really weird, He's got these like really, the way he's shaped is just so odd, but he has like this, he has a machine gun in his body, and he has this huge shield that, which I believe he calls it his Guterier, and it's supposed to be supposedly unbreakable, and he really gives Vash a run for his money just because of the shield. Vash has a hard time dealing with him because he refuses to take the kill shot at all costs. So Vash has a pretty terrible time fighting him because of that. Very interesting fight though, very good for the show. And here we go. And then next for the Hoe Guns, and I believe this is the last of them, we have Kane the Longshot, who, like I said, was exclusive to the anime, was not in the manga. He is a sniper with a rifle that is something, like looking at it in the show, I mean, this thing's got to be it's going to be like a 20-foot long barrel on this thing. Like, it's absolutely huge. And he uses this, like, cloak to make himself basically invisible. He blends into the surroundings. Then you have Chapel the Evergreen, who is, once again, exclusive to the anime. This particular character was not in the manga, but he is Nicholas's trainer in the anime, expert gunfighter. Eventually he ends up being killed by Knives basically he tries to kill Knives because Knives wants Nicholas dead too. So, yeah. And then you have Mid-Valley the Horn Freak, who uses his saxophone to do shockwaves and kill his enemies. Pretty cool weaponry here from the Hoe Guns. Definitely worthy of supervillain titles here. Alright, so I figured I'd go ahead and give you guys my top 5 favorite episodes of the show. Starting with number 5, we have the $60 billion Double Dollar Man, which is the pilot episode. So, of course, that had to be on here just because, you know, the pilot episode is the episode that gets you into the show. And in this pilot, we get a little bit of everything that we're kind of in for. It's got gunfighting, goofy jokes, Vash being goofy, but also showing off his expert gunsmanship. On top of that, you know, it shows the whole, you know, things just kind of happen to him kind of thing, like accidentally destroying a town type, you know, that kind of thing. And so, pretty neat episode. For number 4, I picked Diablo, which is the episode where Vash squares off against Monev the Gale. And this episode in particular is a very good character moment for Vash. Towards the end of the episode, Vash finally gets the better of Monev, losing his cool, you know, losing his temper, because Monev the Gale killed a bunch of the townspeople while they were fighting. And and then at this point, he has Monev on the ground begging for his life with a gun to his face. And then Vash says, you know, if I stop him, if I kill him now, he won't be able to hurt anybody else. And he says things like, well, would it be wrong to kill him? And then Vash starts crying because he almost crosses that line that he swore he would never cross. So very good character moment there for Vash. Next, I picked the Demon's Eye, which is where he squares off against Dominique the Cyclops. But at the beginning of the episode, which is, I think, what makes the episode extra special, is you get to see a glimpse of the Hoe Guns' powers in action against like a gang of like these hooligans, basically, and you get to see a little glimpse of all their powers and the stuff that they do. So very neat episode. There's even a point, it's really funny actually, there's a point where he's fighting Dominique the Cyclops where Dominique says, during this fight, I could have killed you 5 times by now, and he's like bleeding from his head and stuff, and then Vash goes, well, also during this fight, I could have groped you at least 5 times by now, and they both get these like goofy looking anime faces, and then Dominique's blouse like bursts open and the buttons fly off, and it's just really funny. The next one I picked was Sin. Now, Sin is a much darker episode. It's where he faces off against Mid-Valley the Horn Freak and Legato Blue Summers. After besting Mid-Valley, he goes and fights Legato, and Vash finally crosses that line where he intentionally takes a life. He's put in a situation where if he doesn't stop Legato, Meryl and Millie both die, because Legato is forcing the townsfolk to go after Millie and Meryl. and to a point where Legato is actually forcing Vash's hand to put a gun to his own head, to Legato's own head. And so Vash crosses that line, and you can tell how much it really hurts him to do this, which is, stuff like this is another reason why Vash is such a good character. And then number one I picked was The Fifth Moon, which is the episode where he fights Ride the Blade, which I had mentioned before. In this episode, we get to finally see how powerful Vash really is. And once again, to quote my favorite internet reviewer, Ben the Sage, and we really get to see how scared he is of his own power. Vash has something what's called an angel arm, which is where this gun that he has becomes a part of his arm. And it's almost like this energy cannon. And it's just this uber powerful blast that, without even hitting anything, he manages to direct the fire directly upwards to the fifth moon and blows a hole through it. But just not the blast itself, but the repercussions of the blast destroys the entire town. Ride does survive, but then is immediately shot and killed by Nicholas Wolfwood. So just a very good episode. Best, in my opinion, the best fight in the show. So hopefully you guys also like these episodes. And then I think that's going to end it for us. And I really want to thank all of you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a little bit more about the series Trigun and why I enjoy it so much. Please like and subscribe, and I would love to hear your comments below about the show. What are your favorite episodes of the show? What are your favorite moments? There were some moments I wanted to put in, but I didn't want the video to go too long. I have a tendency to do that sometimes. And since I'm doing it in this old school style, like, first reviewers on YouTube, PowerPoint slide style, yay. Doing it all retro style, basically. I don't like to try to make these too long, since a lot of people don't have the attention span for it, but that's okay. So, but like I said, I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe. Please give me your comments down below. And next time on the show, I'm going to give you guys my top 10 horror movie remakes. So I'll see you guys. Same nerd time, same nerd channel. Have a good evening.